If you want to be a breakthrough marketer on social media, you actually need to put the time in to create content and continuously distribute on social media. That exposure and brand awareness that you can generate, that speaks numbers far beyond the very repetitive, okay, we're going to send out 10,000 emails. Because that's good. You know what's even greater? Getting 10 million views on TikTok for your brand.
Today on Strategy Shorts, I'm joined by Christian Brown. He is the co-founder and CMO of Glewee. Christian, it's so great to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Glewee and why you think I invited you to be on the show?
Well, thank you very much for having me. So, like you mentioned, Christian Brown, and CMO, co-founder of Glewee, which is an end-to-end influencer marketing platform for two main user types. So brands on one side being SMB, direct-to-consumer, e-commerce, fashion, beauty, lifestyle, fitness, health and wellness, you name it, brands. They come into our platform with the intent of finding new creators and influencers to collaborate with. And on the flip side of that, we have our creator and influencer user base, which are individuals on social, primarily TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, that are looking to collab with more brands, monetize their following. So for creators, we have our iOS native application where you can do everything from scroll the 10 plus brand deals posted a day to collaborate with brands, submit content, do contracts, chat with brands, see your social analytics, and monetize your following. So end-to-end influencer marketing system. Been working on that for a couple of years now. And yeah, that's the bulk of it.
So lots of stuff there about Glewee, but the thing that I'm really interested in today is your story, actually, because at 25, you're making massive inroads in the marketing game, but you've also had some accolades attached to your name recently, one of which being the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So why don't you give us a little intro as to what's happened there, how that's happened? Yeah, give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the coolest, accolades I could ever have asked for. So, every year, 14, 15, 16,000 people and teams put their name in a hat, essentially. And so there's an application. And so we've done some work with the Forbes team in the past, whether it's like contributing in the councils or working alongside some of their writers. And people had reached out and said, you know what, I think you guys would be great candidates for it. I mean, people from past years and different lists are eligible to kind of nominate. So a few people had reached out and said that, hey, we really want to get you guys in the hat. And so we went through that whole process, and then we met with them. We looked over everything from numbers, success metrics, past work, the foundation of what we've done. And then the list came out and, smack dab in the middle of it. So it was a very cool moment. I think that all in all, it was an experience that had full circle wrapped me into the marketing and advertising game, because at my core, I am a student of advertising. And so it was a very defining moment for me, our team, our crew, everyone involved.
And I think it's an interesting conclusion to a longer journey that you've been on, because I've obviously been doing a bit of episode research, and I've been reading up on your background. And I know that you're from a small town in Massachusetts, and you've been a bit of an entrepreneur for since you were a teenager. There's one particular part of your story where you set up a clothing brand when you were in high school.
Yep.
So perhaps you could talk us through that journey from small town kid via teenage entrepreneur to where you are now. Was there a point on that journey where it suddenly tipped into something more significant? So moved from that experimentation and just trying a few things out and seeing what works into, what you're doing now, which is leading this groundbreaking platform.
Yeah. So it's a very long journey. And when I say long, I think long because of the scale in which my life exists at. 8 years ago or so, when I was in high school, so we had to write different business class projects and stuff. And I was in this business program. We had to write 30-page paper on entrepreneurship, building a business. And I was at the time I was very heavy on social, and this is post Tumblr, beginning of Instagram days. And I was what are the things that I like? I like rap music, and I like social, and I like websites, and I like brands. And I was obsessed with Supreme, Tyler the Creator, and Odd Future were really big at that time. And they were kind of pioneering a lot of yo, this is really cool. These are online businesses. These are sick brands that exist. And I think the early days of Instagram really pioneered what is streetwear and fashion and fit pics and a lot of that stuff. And so I was like obsessed with that. And so built a brand called OK, which is spelled OHKAY. I was like, we're just going to build a word, take a random word that doesn't exist, right? And build a whole world around it. So okworldwide.com. Threw that up. And then I was learning, right, how to screen print, how to take a lot of my designs that I could build in Photoshop, AI, Illustrator at the time, all that stuff in design, and then actually build out screens, print them, vinyl cut stuff, sublimate clothes. Like I just love the idea of like, wow, I can take a design, put it on clothes, build a brand out of it. And then I'm like, okay, well, how are we going to build this? We're going to use social media. So we're going to build a brand, pump it through social media. Anyone I knew that had a social media following, taking photos of them wearing different pieces, hoodies, shirts, hats, this, that, socks, pants, shoes, right? We did every single item under the sun, necklaces, chains, cut and sewn bags, right? And then leverage people I knew in Massachusetts, then leverage people I knew in New York. Once I was taking a lot of photos and working with kids in New York that were like true beginning Instagram fashion influencers, they introduced me to a lot of kids in LA. And this is where the turning point kind of begins, is that generating funds through the business. And then me and my friends that were like kind of under this mini conglomerate, which is just a friend group that had a brand. And we were just working out of like my hometown basement. And it was like, I don't know, 20 feet wide. We just had boxes lined to the ceiling, and I was shipping stuff out 7 days a week. I'd bring like a suitcase to school with me full of packages, bring them to the post office, and then go back home and do it all over again. And then got to use a lot of those times to go out to LA. And that's when I started working with some larger scale influencers, kids that were at the time, I was 17, 18, 19, and people that were in my age group that just became part of my friend group. And they were some of the first kids to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million followers on Instagram. And that's where I kind of looked and said like, whoa, hold on a second. Like there's a lot of brands out there, not only just like fun little friend group, team group, e-com brands like ours, which was to us a groundbreaking experiment. But there were big brands, right? Like the NFL and Chipotle, right? These brands were coming to different creators and influencers in our network. And they were like, hey, we want you to do these huge deals. And so I was working alongside a lot of friends there. And one of my friends named Dylan, who was actually my business partner, founder of Glewee, at the time we were in LA, like looking over contracts and just kind of doing a lot of like the managerial side. And it was like, wow, there's a whole lot of pain points that go into this. And we were seeing pain points from our side. All of us were running different brands online and utilizing platforms like Squarespace, Shopify, all that to build up companies through social. But when you take the grander scheme of things, people with millions of followers didn't have enough money to pay rent. And so we're like, hold on, there's like a true problem that could have product market fit, and it can be scaled through technology. And so fast forward to, 2 years or so, I was running my brand through the entire college duration. I used to have shoe boxes and packages lined to my dorm room, like floor to ceiling, and I would ship hundreds of things out of my dorm room every week. And it was just like a passion project, right? It was funding and fueling a lot of the fun we were having and expansion we could grow, but it was really all done through social. There was no in-person selling. It was all just digital. And that's where it really opened my eyes that like, this is the future of commerce. And so it was natural progression to create something that would at scale allow for brands to then work with creators at massive scale nationwide.
So there was a natural intersection point really where this business that you had been growing was happening organically. You were expanding your product lines, you were getting your friends involved, experimenting with that influencer model. And then at some point, as that grew, you started getting attention from these bigger brands. And that's when it started to unlock these bigger opportunities. And that was the genesis really of the Glewee platform.
Yeah, exactly. So while I was working on a lot of the OK stuff, Dylan was working alongside different creator teams and, fielding a plethora of crazy contracts for a 19-year-old person that doesn't have contractual legal experience is not easy. And that was happening left and right. And creators were getting screwed over and brands were coming in and being like, we'll give you X amount of money to do this post. And it was just like the beginning of the industry essentially for like true Gen Z kids. And so we said, we want to make this more foundationally understandable from a framework element and perspective. We want to make it so creators have an app to get brand deals, right? They don't have to field their inbox. We want brands to be able to find creators at scale. And we want to kind of move away from tracking data in Google Sheets, building contracts in Google Docs, right? going through your Gmail for any and every just bit of way to make money as a creator. We want to consolidate that and really give it to essentially our friend group, right? The people that we were working with originally. And beyond that, we wanted to give it to every creator that we could. And so the only way to do it was with an app and with technology.
So I guess what we're experiencing with you, Christian, is somebody who hasn't had a leg up, like hasn't had a shortcut, or hasn't had some kind of golden ticket in the world of marketing where you've just suddenly found yourself in an amazing role. You've been in the trenches, you've experimented with your friends, you've just tried things out to see what works. And actually, as you found that traction, you've been able to capitalize and go, oh, there's a real opportunity here for us to do something bigger with some really interesting people and brands. And that's great for our audience, because people who listen to Strategy Shorts or watch the show, they're looking for practical advice, real world tips, things that they can try. So, we always focus on practical things here in the show. And I know that you've been giving some thought to the practical advice that you'd like to give to our audience today. So before you start talking about the framework or insight or tool that you've got in mind, who really is the person that you're speaking to today? Like, who is the target listener that you want to reach?
I would say the target ICP here is someone that's Gen Z, someone that is in a role that is marketing oriented at a small to medium sized company that is looking to really stand out where they sit. So there are so many people in the past years that have gotten, whether it's entry level, mid level roles, whether it's an agency or consumer packaged good brand or a new startup. And the marketing role is kind of daunting at first. You might have to wear a bunch of hats and you might have to battle the noise. And sometimes marketing teams look really good and other times they look really bad. So I think this advice would all be geared towards that Gen Z individual that wants to be absolutely stellar in their position in marketing at their org.
Awesome. Well, why don't you take us through it? Because I know that you've got a few things that you'd like to touch on. So you run with it and I'll chip in if I've got any questions.
All right, cool. So what I was thinking on from a framework perspective, right, and going back to that user type or that marketer in which I just referenced, I think that when joining a new org or looking at the work that you're doing in marketing, a lot of times there's a big importance on social. And so a lot of brands, they look at social and some of them do it extraordinarily well. Others of them, they kind of throw it to the wayside. In recent years, we've seen brands of all sizes and industries putting more importance on social. We can see that through the increased spend and portion allocation of total marketing dollars into social. And then within that bucket, even into influencer marketing, which is where we sit. But within the social realm, being able to understand your brand or your company's tone, the identity, the tone of voice, the persona, and the ideal customer profiles in which you're trying to talk to, those are the key elements that you must look at. And then look at the social lens and look at the competitor landscape and say, what's everyone else doing on social? Because you're not going to be the first brand in your industry to break through on TikTok, nor on Instagram, YouTube Reels, YouTube Shorts, anything like that. What you need to do is really break down all of those identifying factors that are the brand you work with or work at, and then create a comprehensive plan of how you are going to make content on social that is going to rise above the noise. Because if you can be the breakout marketer that takes a company or a brand's social profile from nearly non-existent, posting basic statics and a story once a month and these weird company outing images, which are cool. But if you can take that and you can elevate that and really build consistent content and a true funnel of relevant information and content marketing pieces and deliver those succinctly and in a coordinated structure through social, you can be that breakout marketer on your team, in your org that people start to look at. I'll give an example, and it's Duolingo. And for all those that are listening that are not familiar with Duolingo's social presence, I highly advise you go look and follow right now. By far, brand of the year, not only 2022, 2023. So they started with a girl named Zaria, who's on our Forbes list as well. And she was their TikTok manager. And she was able to say, I want to use the owl as a TikTok thing, right? As a mascot, kind of like the tiger from Kellogg's or, I don't know, the old Marlboro man, right? And so now the owl goes in this big form. It's like 6 feet wide owl, 7 feet tall, and it just walks around the office. And that Duolingo owl picked up well over 1 billion impressions on TikTok and Instagram this past year. So does everyone need to be an owl? No. But what that did is it took the brand's identity and tone and it put it into a common theme, which was this mascot in the office and going to courtside games and stuff like that. And now Duolingo reigns victorious in the app space when it comes to social. And they're one of social's favorite brands. And so was Duolingo going to be a stud and an all-star performer on social before this? I don't believe so. I don't believe that the language app that they have is too social native first. But what they've done, I would say, is groundbreaking. And so I would really study some of the brands that are crushing on social, what they're doing, how they're standing out against the noise and amongst the noise, and how they're really coming to be, and look at that and say, how can we be the next one? And then with consistent creation, consistent distribution across all platforms, a consistent tone and identity, a theme, hooks, being able to build that up from the ground up is what I think younger Gen Z marketers have the ability to do tenfold above more senior executives or marketers at organizations because we are so socially native first.
I think what I really like about that example with the owl is that you're also taking something like an existing icon of the brand. You're not having to like workshop or kind of generate something else from scratch. You're not trying to pin your hopes on some kind of new idea. You're actually assessing what are the icons and things that the brand already has in play that you can leverage in a new and exciting way, because people have familiarity with the owl already. So as soon as they see it in this new setting, in this new style of content, you've already got a lot of goodwill, a lot of brand recognition to work with there. So I think that's really, really powerful. And I would encourage people as they're thinking through how they can leverage the assets of their brand, think through what's the existing iconography that I can use and bring to life in a new and creative way. So just as you were talking, I was making some notes over here about the 4 things that you said that people need to be focusing on when they're reviewing the brands or they're thinking about how they can be that breakout marketer. And you mentioned the brand, the tone of voice, the company persona, and the ideal customer profile.
Mm-hmm.
And then the importance of, once you've identified what those 4 territories are that you really need to drill into and understand, you then start to look at, okay, what are the other major players doing on social right now? How are they bringing their brand to life? And Duolingo being a great example of that. And then you talked about showing up with consistency. And I think that's something that a lot of marketers struggle with, because it's an exhausting thing, right? To be constantly creative. So how would you encourage people, or what would be your advice to enable that kind of consistency? So once you've got the ideas, you know what your competitors are doing, you're taking some thinking from them as well and adapting and building on what they're presenting to you as the marketer. But then how do you really cling on to that consistency and make that work for you?
Yeah, it's absolutely, especially out the gate, it's not easy because everyone wants to, when they start, and I've seen this with so many teams, they'll say, oh, let's just do a bunch of TikToks in the office. Like, let's just show the team and be fun and do an office tour, which we've done, right? And it's fun. But that's not going to fill your content feed 7 days a week. So I would break it down into buckets, because how it can look is you could do general static imagery of your product or service. You could do customer testimonials. You could do webinars. You could do UGC from creators. You could do UGC style content that you're making in a studio or in a warehouse or in your office. You could do CapCut style videos. You could do AI generated imagery. There's all these different types of content that you can do. So I would look at all the different types of content that work for your ICP and your brand persona, because if you're a consumer packaged good brand, you might not want to do a webinar on the values of your brand. But if you're a agency selling services, you might want to get a great testimony on a webinar that you then clip up and share that out. So it's really looking at like the true style and what you're trying to convey, and then breaking it down into different types of content. Once you know your different types of content, you can build an altering daily schedule. So one day you're going to do content type 1, the next day content type 3. Then 2 days of content type 2 back to back, because you know that works. But don't just say, hey, I'm going to do this style of content forever and ever and ever. Because yeah, the algorithms are big bad beasts, but they pick up on that stuff. And if people don't like the same style of content every day, you have to switch it up. So having a good mix, kind of like a nice bowl of salad, right? Having all those different ingredients within there, that is your social strategy. And it's not just the lettuce, right? It's not just that one type of post that you're just going to spam the feeds with. It's having all the different ingredients batched together and then using the dressing, which is your brand tone and identity, to bring it all into one cohesive unit. And then that is your social media. And that is your avenue to definitive exploration, right? Because you can send 10,000 emails to 10,000 people. The max amount of contacts you will reach is 10,000. You can post one strong TikTok video that the algorithm likes and reach 10 million people. It's going to take you a lot less time to make the video. And you're going to have to, kind of like roulette, spin the ball around the wheel a ton of times to get those videos and that niche that starts to click for you. Once you get there, that exposure and brand awareness that you can generate, that speaks numbers far beyond the very repetitive, okay, we're going to send out 10,000 emails. Because that's good. You know what's even greater? Getting 10 million views on TikTok for your brand.
And I think what you're saying, which is really important for people to hear, is that you could try everything. You could, follow every creative lead that's introduced to you on your social feeds as the next big thing, or here's how to get 10 million views in your content. Like, we're overwhelmed with strategic suggestions all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But actually picking a few things that you're really going to dial down on and really focus on, like a few things that you can kind of carousel through. But what that allows you to do, and I think this is really key, is that it allows you to build a system around a few ideas, which then enables you to be consistent. Because you only need to become an expert on a few strategies, handpicked strategies that work with your brand, and then build the system, which then enables you to be really, really consistent.
Exactly.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this conversation already, but you know that we love to end up on something really practical for people to take away and try, like a top tip. So from everything that you've said, if you could pick out one thing that you would encourage creators and listeners and viewers to take away and try as soon as this episode finishes, what would that be and why?
Okay, so it's going to be a 10-day run. And we practice this within our org, and I say this to a lot of people. For 10 days, every single day, make a solid piece of content that you are happy with. You genuinely believe is good, whether it's for yourself and your own social pages or your brand's page. And this can be on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, wherever you want to post it. Get a piece of content and distribute it out. If it's a short form video, post it on every single one of those platforms I just mentioned. And just watch what happens. Because eventually you're going to start to see that once you have a sample size of 10, and if they're all different styles or they have different identities or tones or backgrounds, or you're in different outfits every time, what you'll start to see is that some of those are going to perform better than others. Every time you post something in the algorithm, you have a chance. It's like the lottery every single time. Make 10 pieces of content, one a day, spend 30 minutes on it, spend an hour, however much time you can allocate to this. Post each one every day back to back at the same time, whether it's 3 p.m., anytime that works for you, 3 p.m., 5 p.m., maybe when you're off work at 6, 7, 8. Post it every day at the same time and watch which ones succeed better than the others. Don't try to get 1 million views. Don't try to get 100,000 views. It doesn't matter if you don't. Even if you get 100 on one and 300 on the next, that next video performed 3x better than that first. Get a sample size of 10, post them all, keep the foundation of posting the same, where you're posting and at what time, and then measure them against each other, and then see of the 10 which one worked best for you.
And then I guess what that means is that you've got your sample size, or you've got your sample content. You can see which one is performing better than the others, and then you build on that level. Then you create 10, sort of iterating from that successful post, and then pick which one is working best for you at that next level, and then you keep growing from there. Is that the kind of the right idea for this 10-day run?
Exactly. And then you'll at least have a foundation of knowledge behind the algorithm and how it works. And you'll even have some more affinity with posts after that. Because you'll see, you're like, oh, okay, this post did really good. Maybe that person did 10 of them, but I didn't see the other 9. And the 10th one is what gets spit into the algorithm for me and my social consumption. So I think it's great from a social user perspective and a social creator perspective.
Christian, that's awesome. we are about done for time, I'm afraid, but I feel like we could keep talking for a lot longer. So maybe I'll get you on the show for a strategy long episode at some
Absolutely.
point. But thank you so much for making some time for me and the audience. Let's speak again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.